The clock showed nearly 3 a.m. as Jason adjusted the rearview mirror, his tired eyes scanning the deserted roads of the city illuminated by flickering streetlights. He had spent the entire night shuttling a restless crowd from bar to bar, each ride fueled by the rhythms of laughter and fleeting camaraderie. Now, as he prepared for what he hoped would be his last fare of the night, a nagging weariness began to settle in. The chill in the air squeezed in through the car's cracked window, and just as he sighed, the familiar ping of the rideshare app echoed in the silence. He accepted the request with a mix of relief and anticipation. After all, each ride was a story waiting to unfold. Little did he know that this fare would be more unsettling than he could ever imagine. When he arrived at the requested location, an eerie sense of déjà vu washed over him. There, standing in the dim glow of a street lamp, was a passenger whose face struck him as both familiar and unsettling. It was as if he were staring at a reflective surface of his own past, brimming with regret and haunting memories he had long tried to forget. As the passenger got in, a chill swept through the cabin, causing Jason to instinctively grip the steering wheel a little tighter. The tension in the air was palpable. Before he could unveil the feeling gnawing at him, he shifted the conversation into motion, gently asking about the destination. The passenger offered an address that sent an ice-cold shiver down his spine, one he recognized all too well. It was the very street where an old friend of his had met a tragic fate, an unspoken weight hanging between them, as if the darkness itself had decided to join their ride. As Jason drove through the slowly fading neon lights, he could feel the atmosphere turning heavy, the passenger's presence becoming more pronounced with each mile. Curiosity combating his instinctual fear, he engaged in light banter, hoping to distract himself from the unease that danced along his spine. Yet, he was acutely aware that something was amiss. The deeper he probed, the more the passenger's answers bordered on cryptic and foreboding. Time felt suspended as memories flickered like an old film reel, and Jason felt drawn to the passenger, his heart racing with each conversation thread he unwound. It became evident that this encounter was not merely a happenstance. Every exchange, every moment felt preordained. As if fate was orchestrating a chilling reckoning he could escape but not deny. The walls of the car seemed to close in, each heartbeat echoing in sync with the rising tension as both men braced themselves for the path ahead, one forged by shadows and unspoken truths. As Jason navigated the dimly lit streets, he felt compelled to engage his mysterious passenger in small talk, an instinctive attempt to break the thickening tension. "So, what brings you out this late?" he asked, trying to inject some normalcy into the heavy atmosphere. The passenger turned slightly, his eyes shimmering like the moonlight against the windshield. "Just chasing shadows like you once did," he replied cryptically, as if each word held a hidden meaning. Jason felt a jolt at that remark. It felt too personal, too specific. Chasing shadows. It was a phrase he hadn't heard in years, echoing memories of carefree nights spent with old friends, long before everything changed. He chuckled nervously, but a knot twisted in his stomach. What was intended as casual conversation started feeling like an interrogation into his past. As the passenger continued speaking, Jason's mind raced, struggling to piece together the fragments of long-buried memories that resurfaced with alarming clarity. Nostalgia danced with guilt. He recalled the laughter that used to fill the air, quickly overshadowed by the incident that turned everything dark. The passenger referenced specific moments, hints about the lake, the night of the accident, and a confrontation that had reverberated through Jason's life ever since. "Do you remember how cold the water was?" the passenger asked, his voice almost teasing, yet laden with sorrow. Jason felt sweat beading on his forehead as flashes of that fateful night played in his mind, blending with the memory of a friend lost too soon. A wave of guilt washed over him, and he could barely manage to nod in response. the words tethered in his throat as he wrestled with the realization that this conversation was pushing him toward a reckoning he had spent years avoiding. The car's interior felt increasingly stifling as the weight of the passengers' references pressed down on him like a physical force. Each moment stretched unbearably, and the driver was acutely aware that something sinister was unfolding before him. "We all have our regrets," the passenger murmured, shifting in his seat, the darkness wrapping around them both. The casual tone struck Jason like a slap, igniting a mix of anger and fear within him. How could this stranger know so much? In that instant, the atmosphere electrified, and every erratic beat of Jason's heart echoed the truth he had tried so desperately to deny. The past had returned in the form of the very person he had wronged, now seated beside him in this unwelcome reunion. As the miles stretched out behind them, the ride became less about the destination and more about confronting the shadows lurking just out of sight, shadows that demanded to be acknowledged before dawn broke. As they traveled deeper into the night, the atmosphere inside the car shifted dramatically. Jason noticed the overhead lights start to flicker, first giving the faintest tremor of a warning before plunging them into a flickering strobe of light and darkness, each undulation casting elongated shadows across the walls. The air around him thickened, chilling him to the bone, as if some unseen force pressed against the windows, coaxing their very warmth away. He shot a quick glance at his passenger, whose demeanor was disturbingly serene, calm, even. While Jason's heart raced and beads of sweat formed at his brow, the passenger merely stared ahead, a slight smile touching his lips, as if savoring the unfolding drama playing out in the confines of the vehicle. A wave of simmering dread coursed through Jason. He had to question what unimaginable truth lay behind those tranquil expressions. Then, as Jason's breath quickened and an oppressive weight bore down on him, the veil over his memories began to thin. A fleeting flashback struck him like lightning into the night. Images rushed back. The passenger, a younger version of himself, walking alongside him at the edge of that familiar lake, laughter echoing all around them, moments that shimmered with innocence and friendship. And then, the accident. Suddenly, the laughter turned to screaming, then silence. Jason could see it all. The fateful moment when choices had collided like two opposing forces, and one life was extinguished while another continued on, weighted by guilt. Instinctively, he turned to his passenger, searching for answers in those eerily calm eyes. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, the words trembling on his lips. In the midst of this emotional turmoil, the car's temperature dropped further, fog settling on the windows, obscuring their surroundings. Time twisted and stretched in that charged atmosphere. Each second felt like a step deeper into an abyss he had long evaded. The shadows seemed to pulse as if alive, drawing closer and closer, mirroring the tightening grip of his horror and regret. "You were there, weren't you?" Jason asked suddenly, his voice a shaky tremor. The passenger met his gaze, a chill breeze swirling past him, and he simply nodded, the smile now cutting through tension like a sharp knife. "You made choices, Jason. I'm here to remind you." Those words hung in the air long after they were spoken, sending a shunt of icy realization down Jason's spine, forcing him to question the very identity of the soul trapped in the car with him. Was this truly a passenger, or was he conversing with the ghost of his past, bearing witness to a reckoning that could no longer be ignored? As the car rolled into an eerie stillness, a silence thick enough to cut with a knife enveloped them. Jason's heart hammered in his chest, a desperate rhythm echoing the turmoil brewing within him. The passenger finally turned his head, those haunting eyes locking onto Jason with an intensity that felt like a chilling spotlight on everything he had tried to forget. "You don't recognize me, do you?" The words hung in the air, heavy and accusatory, but Jason felt an unshakable sense of dread that somehow he did recognize this figure through the veil of time. Those moments from years past replayed in his mind's eye. a face he once knew, now twisted by anger and grief. The air crackled with tension as the pieces began to align, the terrible truth creeping closer with each blink. "Do you remember that night by the lake?" The passenger continued, his voice low and somber, a melody tinged with pain. The images flooded back. The laughter, the feels of friendship, and then the crash of devastation when distant choices shattered their lives. Jason felt bile rise in his throat as the memory of the argument that led to the accident slapped him back into reality. Faced with those memories, guilt surfaced in waves, crashing over him in grand turmoil. The apparition, this man who sat beside him, was not just a faceless passenger. He was the ghost of his past, the spirit of the friend he had wronged, now confronting him for the choices that altered both their destinies. "I had dreams, hopes," the passenger whispered, the reverberation of each word pounding through Jason's core like a relentless drum. "But your actions stole them from me." The confession had the weight of granite, tying Jason in knots of despair and regret. Each haunting observation opened an old wound, forcing him to acknowledge the casualties of his recklessness, the friendship, the laughter, and ultimately, the life that was cast aside in an instant. With every passing moment, the oppressive weight in the car grew heavier, as if the very souls of both men were engaged in a bitter struggle for redemption. In that echoing silence, Jason realized that the reckoning he had been avoiding for so long was finally here. The stakes had never felt higher as he grappled with the tragic consequences of his choices, now laid bare before him like a dark mirror reflecting his deepest nightmares, keeping viewers on the edge of their seats as they awaited his response to the chilling revelations unfurling in the dying light of night. The atmosphere in the car was heavy with an unsettling tension as the end of the route loomed closer, a final destination that felt anything but ordinary. Jason's hands gripped the steering wheel as he wrestled with the weight of his past laid bare before him. The passenger, now a ghost in an unsettlingly familiar shape, turned to him with an intense gaze, and the air crackled with urgency. "You have a choice to make," he stated, his voice both tempting and haunting, slicing through the silence like a knife. "You can seek forgiveness, or you can continue living in torment, haunted by the choices that brought us here." In that moment, it felt as if the world outside faded into oblivion. All that mattered was the precarious path laid out before Jason, where his decision could either lead to a fragile peace or deeper despair. With every mile they traveled, Jason fought against the memories flooding back, moments of laughter, friendship, and that fateful night when everything changed. He recalled the reckless arguments, the words exchanged in anger, how he pushed too hard, too far, forcing his friend into a fateful choice that spiraled into tragedy. Flashbacks intercut with reality, revealing the raw humanity behind the pain they both endured. Jason saw the friend he had lost, a bright light dimmed by his own reckless actions. The realization of the hurt he caused morphed into an avalanche of guilt, filling him with an almost paralyzing fear of facing the truth that had lingered in the shadows of his mind. The stakes felt monumental. This was not merely about him anymore, but about the price of his choices, and the struggle for redemption was palpable, a conflict within brewing against the dark backdrop of their shared past. As the highway stretched before them, the air thickened with unresolved emotions, pushing Jason toward a tipping point. "What will it be?" the passenger asked, unfurling a final glimpse of hope mixed with lingering pain. The question echoed deep within Jason, forcing him to confront the turmoil that had gripped his soul for too long. His silent battle intensified. Would he be courageous enough to seek the forgiveness he so desperately craved, or would he shackle himself to a life of regret? Each passing second served as a countdown. The weight of every moment grew heavier, amplifying the tension until it became a palpable force. The destination approached, yet the true end was nowhere in sight. Jason was not merely driving a car. He was orchestrating the closing chords of a lifelong conflict, teetering on the edge of a reckoning that could unveil the path to liberation or condemn him to an endless cycle of haunting memories. The stage was set for an emotional climax, pulling viewers to the edge of their seats, eager to discover if Jason could muster the strength to confront both his past and himself in this gripping moment of truth. As the car rolled to a stop, Jason's heart dropped. The destination mirrored the very place that had haunted him for years, a secluded area near the lake, shrouded in darkness, where laughter had once turned to sorrow. The eeriness of the location felt heavy in the air, as if the shadows themselves were closing in, amplifying his sense of dread. Jason's mind raced, grappling with the impact of what this ride had revealed. The weight of unresolved guilt and remorse flooded his thoughts while the passenger remained still, an unsettling calmness radiating from him amidst the storm of emotions inundating the driver. This was not merely a drop-off. Jason sensed he had reached the final intersection of his past and present, where the two would intertwine for one last, painful reflection. "Life is fleeting," the passenger murmured, his voice quiet yet powerful, brimming with an otherworldly resonance that made Jason's skin crawl. "Every choice we make sends ripples through time, sometimes in ways we could never foresee." As he spoke, Jason was entranced, fear battling with a profound awareness of the moment. It was as if the passenger was not only speaking to him, but echoing the message of the universe, a chilling reminder that the price of a momentary lapse in judgment could cost a lifetime. The passenger's words struck chords of clarity within Jason, igniting visions of missed opportunities and irrevocable consequences that felt sharper than ever. This understanding weighed heavily on him, leaving him to ponder the fragility of existence and the haunting reminders that cling to the living long after their loved ones have departed. As the realization sunk in, Jason's pulse quickened, mingling with the wind that whispered through the trees, carrying with it the haunting echoes of their shared history. The passenger leaned closer, their final message lingering in the air like a prayer. "You can either carry this burden of regret or learn from it. Forgiveness can be a release, but it begins with you." With those parting words, the passenger slowly faded from view, merging into the shadows like a specter unraveling into the night. Jason sat there, frozen, staring at the void left behind, the profound weight of the conversation washing over him in waves.